Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider, Making You an Offer You Can't Refuse, Part 2, Calling Gen Z. This week we are returning, as promised, to an appeal I made last month to the Gen Z activists out there. We started off this series with a hard look at the modern forms of slavery. Why? Because Gen Z clearly wants a cause to fight for. But they have also made it clear that when left to their own devices, they will choose a string of total losers. So it is incumbent on the rest of us to help bring to their attention some causes that are actually worth fighting for and suggest some more worthy alternatives, many of which are hiding in plain sight, waiting for them to get motivated enough to do something about them. And what could be a more ambitious cause than putting an end to human slavery in all of its modern forms? Since it has been a month since we first broached the subject, let's review a bit so that we can wrap our minds around the full extent of this problem once more. How bad can the slavery problem really be, given the enlightened, superior, modern world that we all live in? Well, hundreds of slaves are sold every week in Libya. Cameroon has 800,000 slaves. Nigeria, Mali, and Mozambique all still have slaves today. The International Labor Organization says that 7 out of every 1,000 Africans today is a slave. That would be nearly 10 million people. There was a total of 11 million victims during the entire transatlantic slave trade, with all of the years that it existed combined. So, where are the protests for today's slaves? Where are the protests for the millions more who are enslaved around the world by human traffickers? It's not like a problem this big could be a secret that no one knows anything about. Why didn't all of the BLM activists protest when the Houthis started up slavery again in Yemen? Don't those lives matter? The same activists who make their living as race hustlers by condemning on moral grounds the evil of a form of slavery that went on hundreds of years ago, which I also condemn, never have a word to say about the people engaging in slavery today. Why is that? I don't know about you, but that seems a little odd to me. If their focus was actually on slavery and its inherent evils, then their first attention would be on condemning those who engage in it today and on freeing those who are the actual living victims of it right now. But they ignore the present in favor of the past and ignore the slavers of the modern age, many of which are people of color, in favor of the villains of a bygone era. Even then, they are only interested in the white villains of the past, of which there were many. But they're not interested in the other races that also engaged in slavery and who never voluntarily gave it up. Clearly, their moral outrage is not very sincere. Not when they care less about the plight of people living under slavery at this very moment than they do about the people who lived in slavery 8 generations ago. People that we can't help anymore. There's no way to win that fight. And so there's no risk that any of the people that they stir up by using what happened in the past might feel empowered by finding out that they were capable of achieving a meaningful victory here in the present. Gen Z, why are you settling for the immoral cause of "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," which is a call for genocide, by the way, according to the people who came up with that slogan? When your cause could be, "From each sea to shining sea, every human being shall be free." You can bring to fruition the greatest cause that was ever started by those who came before you. And as you stand on the shoulders of those who began this fight, you can do something even bigger than they did. So why aren't you? You might ask, just how many slaves are there in the world right now? Answer. The global estimate 4 years ago was that there were 49.6 million slaves worldwide. 28 million of these people are enslaved through forced labor or are born into slavery, while 22 million more are enslaved through the use of arranged marriages that they were forced into against their will, often while they were still children. In fact, over 12 million slaves are children. 29 million slaves are held in Asia and throughout the Pacific. At least 7 million slaves are in Africa. Another 6 million are in Europe and Central Asia. 5 million more are in North and South America. And 2 million people live as slaves in Arab nations. Just 10 nations hold 2/3 of the world's slaves between them. India, North Korea, China, Pakistan, Russia, Indonesia, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Turkey, and the United States. 17 countries have governments who use forced slave labor, enslaving 3.9 million people between them. Slavery is the most prevalent in the Arab world, where there are 10.1 slaves for every 1,000 people. When individual countries are assessed on a case-by-case basis, North Korea is by far the worst offender, where 104.6 out of every 1,000 people are slaves. That's more than 1 in 10. Turkey is 5th on that list, with 15.6 out of every 1,000 people living as slaves. The UAE is almost as bad at 13.4 slaves per 1,000 people. Russia, Afghanistan, and Kuwait sit at 13 slaves per 1,000. Venezuela sits at 9.5. Syria at 8.7. Haiti at 8.2. India, the Congo, and Kosovo at 8. Lebanon at 7.6. Iran at 7.1. Qatar at 6.8. Mexico at 6.6. Sri Lanka at 6.5. Yemen at 6, and here in the United States, 3.3 out of every 1,000 people are slaves. Norway has the best stats in the world at 0.5 slaves per 1,000, or 1 slave out of every 2,000 people, while Japan has the best stats in Asia at 1.1 per 1,000. Australia and New Zealand have 1.6 slaves per 1,000. But 4 countries haven't even made human trafficking illegal. They would be Hong Kong, Somalia, North Korea, and Vanuatu. The International Labor Organization says that slavery is still increasing, not decreasing. It has continued to rise significantly in the last 5 years. 10 million slaves were added to the world's tally just between 2016 and 2021 alone, which is when the world reached 50 million slaves. Even if that number has plateaued and the growth rate has continued at the same level, which there is no reason to believe has happened, then we would actually be at around 58 million slaves in the world today. Again, during the entire transatlantic slave trade combined, there was a total of 11 million slaves taken from the continent of Africa. Even during the much larger Islamic trans-Saharan slave trade, which went on during the same period of time as the transatlantic slave trade and continued to go on long after the transatlantic slave trade had ended, 18 million slaves were taken from Africa by them. Both slave trades on both sides of the world, when you add up all of their victims over all of the years that they existed, took 29 million slaves from Africa combined. And by comparison, in one given year, we are at least 49.6 million slaves in the world as we speak right now. That is already, on average, nearly one person out of every 150 people planet-wide who is living right now as a slave. Didn't I promise you an impressive cause? 27.6 million people are victims of human trafficking and end up enslaved that way. And at least 1 million of these victims are right here in the United States. We are one of the largest destinations in the world for modern slavers to sell trafficked victims. Super Bowl Sunday, which is coming up next week, is the biggest slave auction day for sex traffickers in America every year. Now, admittedly, that number might be less this year now that P. Diddy is behind bars, but it's still a big problem, people. In our first episode on this topic, I pointed out that none of us will be able to succeed in changing a problem this big if most people continue to be unaware that it is a problem and one that they need to be doing something about. So getting the word out there has to happen before we can even start this fight. This drum needs to be beat until it falls apart. Luckily, Gen Z is fantastic about getting stuff out there on social media. You guys love sharing links and reposting things and fueling viral stories, and you rock at it. So play to your strengths. I can't do it. I'm awful when it comes to social media, and I have no desire to get any better at it, if I'm being honest. I'm a love 'em and leave 'em type when it comes to social media. I'm in, I'm out, I don't get emotional, I don't get attached. When it comes to tech in general, I'm lucky when I eventually figure out the simple stuff. That's why this can't be my cause, but it can be yours. You can actually light the world on fire with this revolution. So get out there and do it. Do what you do best. Obsess on your keyboards until this is all that people are talking about. You will have to get some major momentum going before you can accomplish anything meaningful in the way of change. And no matter what country you are living in, getting the word out can be the start of your contribution to getting this movement off the ground. In last month's episode, I focused on the problems here in the USA. I pointed out that in America, the conservative estimate is that we have 12 million people here illegally right now. And that does not take into account any of the unknown gotaways, of which there are millions more. But let's just consider the 12 million known illegal immigrants that are here. That is equal to the entire population of 11 states combined. Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, Rhode Island, Montana, Maine, New Hampshire, and Hawaii. And that's the conservative estimate. But what does any of this have to do with slavery? I'm going to tell you. Illegal immigration is how the modern slavers bring their human cargo into the United States in order to sell them here. Now, that may not be what you want to hear, but it is an ugly fact. And immigrants are among the most vulnerable people who end up easily becoming victimized by these traffickers, enslaved and then sold. With the border absolutely wide open, as it has been for the last 4 years, some of the millions of people who crossed illegally into our country were neither trafficker nor trafficked. But by choosing to go about things in that way, illegally, when they could have easily come across legally, they have provided the necessary cover for the slavers by overwhelming the Border Patrol. Agents were spread too thin to find and stop the traffickers, which means that they never had a chance to free these modern slaves as they were being smuggled across into the country. We want immigration, but we want every single bit of it to be legal so that we can decide exactly who we are letting in and vet them properly. That way, we can also be sure that innocent people aren't being hurt in the process. You can't end slavery if you have illegal immigration. But the good news is that you can have legal immigration and still end slavery. So let's put in the effort to make people do things the right way. It's worth it, after all, to keep some poor person from living as someone else's slave, right? Last month, we got into the specifics of what Gen Z could actually do about this problem, starting with the more than 300,000 children who were sent across the border alone by these slavers, and which the Biden administration proceeded to lose. Some of these lone children were as young as 2 years old. And that joke of an administration turned them over to random adults, most of which were not checked out beyond a phone call, during which these random people claimed to be family members, claims that they were not required to back up with any proof. These people were supposed to check back in so that we knew that these children were all right. But these people have disappeared with over 300,000 innocent children. Some of them may actually be with their families, who need to check in and let us know that so that we do not have to waste our resources looking for them when they could be used to save other children who are in trouble. So why not get busy getting the word out about the need for people to be responsible and check in? It would take Gen Z no time at all to organize that information, telling people where to go to check in with the government, so that they can make sure that these children are happy and healthy. And also, so that we can finally vet the adults and make sure that these are indeed family members that these children are with. As for the children who are not with their families, who have been trafficked and are being abused right now in our country and abandoned to that life without a second thought, start petitioning the government for photographs of these children. We all know that you can be really annoying when you want to be. So put that to good use for once. Demand that photos of these children be released to the public, as well as photographs of the people who came to pick them up. The children who are being held in slavery are going to be kept mostly out of sight, so they are going to be nearly impossible to spot. But the slavers who took them will still have to function out in the world with the rest of us. They'll be easier to find. And we can all help the police find them if we know who we're looking for. Your generation is very good at keeping an eye out for people who are dangerous and who need to be found. Multiple criminals have been caught this way by you. Now, don't look for them so that you can confront them, which you shouldn't do because they're incredibly dangerous. But keep an eye out so that you can send in tips. And then let the trained police do the confronting. Like I said, many criminals have been caught this way, and these modern slavers can be caught this way too. But first, we need to know who they are. So the government needs to make that information available to the public. Then we can all do our part. And you, Gen Z, are the very people who can provide the pressure that is necessary in order to make that happen. Light up social media. Organize protests. You love those. Just keep them peaceful so that no one has an excuse to discredit this. But get out there and do your thing. I would like to point out that this cause has nothing to do with being on the left or the right politically. I would argue that you can oppose Trump as a person for the rest of his life if you want to. I'm not going to try and stop you. But surely, You're not willing to support slavery just to oppose Trump. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day, people. Anyone who opposes slavery is in the right, no matter who they are, even if it's Trump. So don't worry about which side he is on, and don't let that determine which side you are going to be on. Fight to end slavery no matter who is doing the same thing, and no matter who is not joining in this fight. Although it might be worth noting and remembering who those people are who don't want to see this atrocity come to an end. Fight the fights that need fighting, not the ones that include the guy that you like or dislike the most. Trump has put Tom Homan in charge of the border. He is our new border czar. He ran ICE and worked in immigration under 6 different presidents, both Democrat and Republicans. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for George Bush. He worked for Bill Clinton. He worked for George W. Bush. And he worked for Barack Obama. Then he worked for Donald Trump the last time around. Now he's come out of retirement again to get the border back under control. Again. The media has aggressively tried to paint Tom as a calloused individual who hates immigrants and who is going to go on some sort of a rampage against them. This is because they fight their fights based on how much they hate the person who is spearheading the opposition. So, you'll have to be the grown-ups in the room, Gen Z, and show the old guard how to rise above and fight the fights that need fighting. Despite the media's best efforts, the majority of people have not fallen for their slander of Tom. If people just get on the internet, they can look up the videos to see for themselves what he actually said. So we did that very thing and covered exactly what Tom has actually said, what his plans are, and all of the fear-mongering lies that the media has been spreading in an embarrassingly unsuccessful attempt to gather a pitiful opposition against him. If you want an in-depth look at what Tom had to say in his own words, then I encourage you to go back and listen to last month's episode in order to get a more comprehensive view of the problem. Today I will just recap for you a few of the things that Tom had to say to Dr. Phil. The first message was his answer to the question of why he was so passionate about this issue. Quote, "Because of the tragedies I've seen in my career. I started out as a Border Patrol agent in 1984, so I wore the uniform. I became an ICE agent, first ICE director that actually came up through the ranks. I've talked to young girls as young as 9 that were raped multiple times by members of the cartel. And you get on your knees and you talk to a little girl that had everything innocent and pure ripped from her. She'll never be the same. It moves you. I stood in the back of a tractor trailer with 19 dead aliens at my feet, including a 5-year-old little boy. They were all in their underwear because they were baking to death. They died in that steel box. That one congressman said I didn't care about dying children unless they were white. I stood there and knelt beside that 5-year-old boy and put my hands on him and said a prayer for him because I knew what his last hour of life was like. No one deserves to die that way, especially children. I've held many dying people. I've held many dead people. I've talked to a lot of women and children that were sexually assaulted. It all could be prevented if we secure the border. A secure border saves lives. So I wake up every day pissed off at what this administration did to the most secure border of my lifetime. We're going to secure the border once again to save lives. The second point that Tom made so effectively was about the inhumane reality behind the compassionate sounding theory of open borders. Quote, "We had the most secure border ever. Illegal immigration at a 45-year low. Illegal immigration was down 83 to 90% depending on what time frame you looked at. So we can do it again, and we have to do it. People say President Trump's policies are inhumane, they're racist. And it's just nothing further from the truth. There's studies done. 31% of women who make that journey through the cartels admitted to being sexually assaulted. So we know that number is probably higher, right? When President Trump had illegal immigration at a 45-year low, when 90% less people were coming, how many women weren't being sexually assaulted? How many children didn't drown in that river? How many pounds of fentanyl didn't get into the country to kill Americans? How many women and children weren't sex trafficked? Under Joe Biden, sex trafficking is up 600%. Fentanyl has killed over 250,000 of Americans. Record numbers of people on terrorist watch lists coming across the border. In Trump's administration, we had 13. They've got over 300. So President Trump's policy saved lives by the thousands. Most humane policy they've ever seen. Securing the border saves lives, period. For the record, Tom promised that legal immigrants and naturalized U.S. citizens have nothing to fear from deportations. He has nothing against people that come here legally for a better life. Quote, absolutely not. This country is built on immigrants. I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm anti-illegal migration because I understand the whole ugly underbelly of what that means. Trafficking is up over 600%. Over 500,000 children have entered this country through the use of cartels, separated from their families. In this administration, who didn't properly vet the sponsors they released them to, they can't find over 300,000 of them. And that's something President Trump's committed to doing, finding these children and saving them. It's not a coincidence in 4 years of an unsecured border, we have historic overdose deaths from fentanyl. It's coming across between the ports of entry. But the Border Patrol's overwhelmed. And that's what people need to understand. They want to talk about innocent illegal immigration. They're coming for a better life. I get that. But you need to understand, when you overwhelm the system like they've done the last 4 years, most of the Border Patrol is no longer on patrol. They're making sandwiches, changing diapers. They're making hospital runs. They're dealing with humanitarian crises. So when you pull 70% of agents off their national security duty, that's when they move the fentanyl in to kill Americans. That's when they move the 600% increase in sex trafficking. That's when the bad people come. And look, 2 million people paid more to get away. Why did 2 million people pay more to get away? Because they could have paid less, get to the border, cartel's job's done. Turn yourself into a green uniform, get processed, get released within 24 hours, get a free airline ticket to the city of your choice, get a free hotel room, get 3 meals a day, get free medical care, and in 90 to 120 days, get work authorization, which is the very reason you came here. Why did 2 million people pay more to get away? Because they didn't want to be vetted. They didn't want to be fingerprinted. That should scare the hell out of everybody. It scares the hell out of me. How many of those came from a country sponsoring terror? End quote. Under the ridiculously wide open border of the Biden administration, there were legal ports of entry everywhere. Yet the cartels flooded people across in between those ports of entry so that the Border Patrol had to stop patrolling and go assist these stranded people, leaving gaps. These people who crossed in between the legal ports of entry still had the option to do so without any consequences as long as they went up to a green uniform. They would still get all of the goodies that Tom listed despite entering the country illegally. only the agents in brown uniforms will turn them around and send them home for coming across the border illegally. The cartels knew all of that. They told this to the people they were bringing across. How do we know that they told them that? Because they told us that they knew this. The only reason to cross illegally and then run to avoid border patrol and pay the dangerous cartels even more money to help you get away from the people in the green shirts with the goodie bags would be if you had something really bad to hide. Quote, they pay more to get away, and that scares the hell out of me because I don't know how many terrorists cross this border under Joe Biden, but someday we're going to find out, and it's going to be a bad day for America. Even the FBI director agrees with me that the southwest border is the biggest national security vulnerability this nation has seen. End quote. We know that over 300 people whose names were on terrorist watch lists were caught crossing our border. 183,055 were caught who had pending criminal convictions against them in other countries. That's apart from the people that ICE was allowed to arrest. And another 178,508 people with pending criminal convictions against them in other countries were actually allowed to be removed by ICE because of the seriousness of their charges. We saw the kinds of serious criminals with known convictions who were allowed to stay in this country, like the man who killed Lake and Riley. So that should tell you the types of charges that were made against the people that actually did get deported. And those numbers only include the people who were stopped and caught. Who knows how many millions more got away from their pursuers or who came in without us ever knowing about it. And we have no idea where these unbelievably dangerous people are right now or what they are doing to the innocent people around them. Tom says that 3 jobs will start happening now that we've made it to Inauguration Day. Number 1, they will secure the border. Number 2, they are going to start deporting the people who are here illegally, starting with the ones that we know are dangerous criminals. They will prioritize the people who are threats to national security, such as terrorists, and those who are threats to public safety, such as violent criminals. And number 3, they're going to start looking for these 300,000 children until they find all of them and save those who need our help. Quote, so day 1, we're going to be looking for these public safety threats, arresting them, detaining them, and deporting them. And if the sanctuary city mayors don't want to help, then get the hell out of the way. Because we're coming, we're doing it. End quote. Of the known 12 million illegal immigrants in our country, only a little over 5 million of them are from Mexico. Over 2 million of them are from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. So that's a little over half of them from Central and South America so far. Almost 500,000 of them are from India. Over a third of another million are from the Philippines. Another 250,000 are from Venezuela, many of which have been emptied out of their prisons and mental institutions and sent here so that their government doesn't have to deal with their own problems and criminal populations. Another 250,000 of them are from China. Most of those are military-age men, and China doesn't allow its citizens to freely immigrate. It's not like that many people escaped from China. So what's going on there? Over a third of 1 million people have come from Colombia and Brazil, and these are just the top 10 countries that we have received immigrants from. We have also received large numbers of immigrants from Africa and the Middle East, and from almost every country on the globe. You might ask, which of our states ended up bearing the burden of feeding and housing most of these illegal immigrants, and which states are suffering from enormous rises in crime as a result of allowing drug dealers and gang members to sneak in with immigrants because we have not been vetting everyone properly. Most immigrants have gone to the largest cities in the states of California, New York, Florida, and Texas. So most of these people are not working on farms picking our food. There aren't a lot of farms in New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, or Houston. And apparently, illegal immigrants in California have been arrested for allegedly being among the arsonists who were caught deliberately setting additional fires there. So, California, New York, Florida, and Texas. 2 of those are blue states. 2 of them are red ones. This is not a partisan issue, or at least it shouldn't be. It is affecting both sides, and both sides need to be working to fix it. After all, they all work for us, the American people, not for themselves, and not even for the people in the rest of the world. They can have compassion for people from other parts of the world and the problems that they face, as we all should. But that's not who they work for. They work for the people who elected them to represent us and our interests, i.e., Americans. And we need to never let them forget that again. Any politician who has trouble remembering that simple, foundational reality needs to be fired immediately and replaced with someone who can manage to remember what their job is and what it isn't. 4% of the American workforce is made up of illegal immigrants, including 30% of agricultural workers and 13% of construction workers. Many of them pay taxes to the state and federal governments through their payroll. Some of them pay property taxes as well. But illegal immigrants also have access to food stamp programs and state-funded health care, such as Medicaid, all at the taxpayer's expense. They are barred from participating in most federal assistance programs. However, individual states and cities have been offering them additional benefits also at the taxpayer's expense and without their consent. This doesn't just affect the taxpayers who are living in these cities and states, because the federal government has been having to help these cities and states foot the bills for their giveaways. Would LA need help right now to pay for the fires if they hadn't spent so much of their incredibly high taxes on programs like these? And the money that is being given to them to fix these problems comes from all of us. So when California diverts money from caring for their own basic needs, like fire departments and other necessities, in order to pay for frivolous sanctuary city politics, then disasters happen, and those of us who made better common sense choices end up footing the bill to clean up the entirely predictable mess that results. New York, for example, offers illegal immigrants cash assistance, burial cost assistance, help via emergency cash assistance, free school meals, free housing in historic 5-star hotels, free meals costing over $20 a plate delivered 3 times a day to these hotels, translators, art therapy classes for the children of migrants, etc. New York City alone is spending at least $4.6 billion with a B dollars every year on costs like these for illegal immigrants. What if we could be putting that money towards the national debt instead? And by doing so, lower the cost of living for all of our citizens. or even towards helping our nation's homeless veterans by providing them with adequate help for their mental health issues for a change. Maybe we could put a dent in that whole 44 a day thing if we actually got the priorities that we are responsible for straight for a change. The strain on our healthcare system raises the cost of healthcare for all of us, too. Americans are paying an extra $8,800 per every million illegal immigrants. So that's over $114 million in extra costs through hikes to the costs of our healthcare because of the strain on the system. They have to be able to pay healthcare workers for all the extra patients who are uninsured, meaning we get to make up the difference in our costs. And that number of 114 million extra dollars is based just on the 12 million illegal immigrants that we know are here. That is not counting the costs of the additional several million illegals that are unknown gotaways who are showing up to ERs with gunshot wounds and drug overdoses. Yet the vast majority of Americans still support legal immigration, according to all of the polls. When done legally, immigration seems to be a net gain, despite some of the initial costs to us. The problem is illegal immigration, most especially because it allows the dangerous cartels to traffic in drugs, crime, and human beings in the form of slaves. Crossing the border illegally is a crime. It is a misdemeanor, and it is a deportable offense. The people doing this know that. They are making the choice to go about things in that illegal way. If they choose to do things legally instead, there won't be any problem. And we do have the right to demand that from them as the price of entry into our country. The problem really has been the Biden administration. They enabled traffickers and slavers to victimize innocent people, and they went on enabling them to do so long after the consequences of their policies became obvious. Whether you compare Biden's policies to Trump's or to Obama's, he was the anomaly. He was the radical one when compared to either side of the aisle in the past. Under Trump, there were approximately 2 million deportations during his 4 years. Under Obama's first 4 years, there were 3.2 million deportations and another 2.1 million during his second 4 years. So both of the former presidents were doing roughly about the same. Tom was in charge under both of these men. That was him doing the deportations under a Democrat like Obama and under Trump. Yet the media acts like bringing back Obama's guy is monstrous and dangerous. In fact, President Obama gave Tom a Presidential Rank Award for the job he did during his administration. It was the Biden administration that was the aberration here. It was this administration that acted more like a crime family than a government. And they enabled the very worst of humanity to do the worst things imaginable to other innocent human beings. And they are not going to be remembered kindly for that. Tom says, quote, "I don't care about politics. I don't care what people think about me, never have. I'm going to do the job. It should be a nonpartisan issue. Let's forget about illegal immigration for a minute. When you cause a crisis as big as the Biden administration has done, now we're talking about 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl. 600% increase in sex trafficking. A record number of aliens that have died crossing the border. Historic number. Almost 4,000 have died crossing this border under the Biden administration. We're talking about enormous suspected terrorist threats coming at record numbers. This isn't just about illegal immigration. When you cause a crisis this big, It causes all these bad things to happen. So when you talk about terrorism or 250,000 dead Americans, this should be a nonpartisan issue, I would think. And Republicans, Democrats, and independents, we all agree on this. But the left still doesn't get it. And I find that troubling. I've seen so many tragedies in my lifetime. Some of these still keep me up at night. While you and I are talking right now, women are being raped by criminal cartels on the border. While we're talking right now, a child will die tonight. And I'm done with it. I'm sick of it. A secure border saves lives. And I can't wait till January 20th when President Trump is back in power and we secure this border, end quote. And those efforts are now, thankfully, underway and succeeding. I promised Gen Z that I would return to this topic to look once again at modern slavery 1 week before Super Bowl Sunday, which is the biggest day of the year for human traffickers looking to sex traffic their victims in the United States. Next weekend will be an awful day for a lot of victims out there. I said I would take a look at what people all around the world can do to help put an end to this atrocity. But I warn you right now, Gen Z, you aren't going to like this. Today's proposition will really test how committed you are to your ideals when it means giving up even a few of your luxuries and comforts and privileges for a little while. Most of you are too young to remember, but there used to be a lot of blood diamonds in the world. Criminal gangs in Africa were rounding up slave labor, including children, whom they brutalized viciously in order to mine these profitable diamonds, which they then sold all over the world. There were children who lost limbs to their brutality in order to get a pretty stone that sparkles out of the earth. When enough attention was finally brought to this fact and people realized that their shiny baubles meant that someone else paid in blood and tears, people began refusing to buy blood diamonds anymore. They demanded transparency from their jewelers. The dealers now had to be able to prove where their diamonds came from and that slave labor had not been used to mine them. And that simple stand ended that atrocity. Slave labor has to stop being profitable if you want to end it in countries where you have no authority or power. When China has to put up nets around some of its buildings in order to prevent the workers from committing suicide, that should tell you something. It also tells you something when China sends its Uyghur population to camps where they sterilize them against their will. The only question is, are you willing to stop it by deciding to also stop buying products from China? Are you willing to use economic pressure, which is the only weapon you have, in order to force them to change or not? Are you willing to pressure companies like Apple to move their factories out of China as a part of that pressure, using the threat of a boycott against them if they don't? Are you willing to give up your iPhones for a year and buy your technology from a company who is not working with a country that uses slave labor until changes are made? Or does the brand of your goodies mean more to you than the slaves who suffer around the world? Too harsh? Maybe. But also true and therefore fair. Hey, I told you you wouldn't like this. But no real cause has ever been won without real sacrifices being made as part of the deal. And when compared to the sacrifices made by those who fought these forces in the past, who often had to risk their lives to create change, is this sacrifice really that big? Are you willing to put out the effort to look into the clothing companies that you patronize with your money and demand transparency from them so that you know if your cute top was made in a sweatshop in the Philippines? Are you willing to buy clothing exclusively from companies that can prove that they do not use slave labor from third world countries in order to maximize their profits? Are you willing to buy more expensive jeans from a company that is not victimizing innocent people? Which means that you may only be able to afford to buy 2 pairs of jeans instead of 4. Are you willing to do that in order to keep a child from living their life as a slave just to give you cheap goods? I'll even give you your first tip. Jocko Willink has a clothing company that does things the right way. Google him. Now, here's where I'm going to lose you. I know that. So brace yourselves. Are you willing to force TikTok to divest from Chinese ownership by agreeing to watch your videos on any one of the dozens of other platforms that are available if they don't? Are you willing to support the ban if they refuse to divest from Chinese ownership rather than be manipulated into being their pawns in this fight? Or is your social media addiction just too strong? Is your morality just posturing? Or are you willing to sacrifice something that actually means something to you? If you're on the fence about how willing you really are to make sacrifices in your own life, then I encourage you to watch the film The Sound of Freedom. This movie is the true story of an actual hero, Tim Ballard. It is a heartbreaking look at the world of trafficking and its victims. It never crosses the line into being graphic, but it is no less unbearable to contemplate for the lack of visuals. It absolutely does not gloss over the ugly reality of what some of our fellow human beings have to endure. At one point in the film, a man realizes that he has unknowingly had sex with a minor who has been trafficked into prostitution. In that moment, he realizes that he is the cause of the sadness in that broken child's eyes. Are you really willing to be the cause of that same sadness in the eyes of other children around the world in order to have your apps and your favorite tech brands and your trendy products? Surely you can make the sacrifice of watching one uncomfortable movie if it provides the motivation that you need to get off your asses and start putting an end to this. It might even cause you to start asking some good questions, like, why Hollywood went to such major efforts to smear this movie and its real-life hero, when this should have been a cause tailor-made for the showy celeb champions of the oppressed. It might even cause you to question if Hollywood's known problem with sexually exploiting children has anything to do with their motivation behind making their unsuccessful attempts to keep people from seeing this film. And then those questions could lead you to a place where you have to pass on seeing a movie that you really wanted to see because you refused to put money into the hands of a celebrity that you suspect may have something more important than jewelry on those hands. The question is, are you really willing to take a stand, or is it easier to just post hashtags while you change nothing in this world? Yes, consider that me daring you to be worthy and impress the hell out of the world. Money. More than anything else, money is how you change things. Because people, companies, and even countries will change, and quickly, when you threaten to give them less of your money if they don't. Blood diamonds proved that. The Budweiser boycott proved that. So, are you willing to do the research on a company before you buy their products? Are you willing to share the research with other people so that they know which companies they should stay away from? Are you willing to refuse to buy iPhones until they sever ties with China, for example, and get some other brand just for 1 year to make these changes happen? Or are you only looking for causes that ask nothing more from you than having you post faux outrage online in a show of fealty? Do you want to make a real difference? Or do you just want to participate in all the cheap, empty virtue signaling of performance culture? You're adults now, and it's time to decide who you are going to be. If you're one of the few people who is interested in the genuine article, then come back next month for our final episode on what you can do to help end modern slavery. It starts with getting the word out. The rubber meets the road with the all-powerful dollar. But there's one final angle, and I'm going to need some input from minds that are more brilliant than mine for the details on this last one. So get ready for a little audience participation next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and follow. I hate to ask that of people, but it's how these things become successful. And I hope you come back next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.